Hi everyone, welcome to today's OneSignal and live activities webinar. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Meg O'Hearn. I'm the Community Marketing Manager at OneSignal, and I'm joined by my teammates, Ruby Childs and Josh Wetzel, who are going to talk you through live activities and everything that you need to know about them. So just as we're getting started, a little bit of housekeeping. We're using GoToWebinar. You'll see that you have a control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. There's a chat there, and you can click the arrow next to it to enter any questions you have or comments. There's also a questions box that you can use, so you can enter questions there for Josh and Ruby as we go through the session today. We are going to save questions for the end, but feel free to type them into the chat for questions as we go, if you want to just get them out of your mind and not have to hang on to them and remember them to the end. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Hopefully you can all see that.
We can indeed now.
Great.
Welcome everybody. We're excited to have you here joining us to talk about live activities. Very excited both for the application and our support of it. So as Meg mentioned, I'm Josh Wetzel and this is Ruby. So we're excited to chat with you today. Let's start off at the top. I think a lot of people probably know what live activities are, but let's just level set. What are live activities, Ruby?
Well, live activities are very much an interactive push notification. So it now appears on your iPhone as a small widget on your home screen. And the really fun part about live activities is they actually update. So therefore, they're very much dynamic. What we see today with push notifications is they just generally very kind of like static. So really live activities somewhat break away from that. They last on the screen for around an 8-hour period with a 2-hour buffer either side for when the user specifically joins to. So they can be there for around 12 hours at most. A couple of other things as well around live activities, they use something called the Activity Kit. So the Activity Kit is a library that Apple has provided to create these small kind of like widgets on the home screen itself. So they're built into iOS applications and they really came out with iOS 16.1, which was released a couple of weeks ago.
That's awesome. So you touched on a lot of components there. Roughly 8 hours is an activity and you've got on both ends. So the spirit of it is this is something that's an active event. What are some of those active events we talk about? Like what are examples that people can take with them?
Yeah, this is great. So yeah, we've got a couple of on our screen here. So we see like two particular use cases. We've got the use case and delivery applications, as well as we see here with Uber, Lyft, very much around when your car's going to arrive, when your food's going to arrive, when your packages are going to arrive. So particularly that very timely kind of like live activity or push notification that we had previously. And then we have this second case too, which is very much event driven. So imagine you're going to your favorite sports game, you're watching football on TV, maybe you're working at the same time too, and you just want to quickly glance up at those scores. Really those event driven based activities are really key and primary. But we're beginning to also see like a wealth of other alternative live activities beyond both your delivery as well as your sports or event based games. For example, we see fintech, gaming, travel, e-commerce, all being able to begin using live activities. So imagine now you've got a bid on a particular item, you're doing a countdown and you want to make sure no one outbids you. You want to kind of like keep track in terms of making sure you get that item. So auctions here are really key as well with live activities.
Yeah, I'm actually personally excited for that. I like to sell.
Yeah.
What's the core value prop? We kind of touched around that, but like when you think about as a business, like why would I want to implement this and what's going to be the driver for me from a user experience standpoint?
Yeah, well, we see two use cases here, as noted before. We've got that personalized one-on-one live activities, really being able to send people out very personalized messages. Yeah. And so far we've seen that for push notifications, but live activities can get even more personalized. And then we see, of course, the event base. So really making sure that you've got loyal customers engaging with a large form of event, really key to kind of like increase your loyalty and your customer engagement. Yeah. So really live activities could be seen as an extension of the application itself. So really you've got real estate space on the home screen, which is like key, like having that quick glance, being able to see a look and branded feel of a live activity, really aligning it with the application too. So yeah, it's very much around kind of like brand as well as customer loyalty.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to stress here is that your most loyal users, if you do this right, you're engaging them in key moments or breaking news or delivery, it's going to be the things that they lean into, and they're going to be remembered, and it's going to be much more useful than anything you've ever had before, because it's omnipresent on the lock screen. They can follow along. So what I think I'm personally, as a consumer, excited. I'm a big sports fan. Ordering food, I want to know when it's delivered, so there's some great use cases there. Let's talk a little bit about the actual functionality itself and how consumers would get into it. So first and foremost, how does a user interact with a live activity? Like, do they need to be subscribed to push? How does a live activity start? Like, can we walk through that?
Great question. So actually, it's really interesting because although it uses push to send an update to a live activity, it doesn't actually use a push permission. So therefore, a user doesn't need to go into their settings and opt in for live activities. Users are actually opted in by default. It's a separate permission prompt from a push permission as well. So if your user isn't engaged in push, they can be engaged in live activities. So that's a key fact there.
Yep.
The second thing is as well in terms of how a user really starts a live activity. So when a user is in an application, there could be, for example, a dynamic button or even an in-app modal that prompts your user and says like, hey, like, do you want to join this live activity? And that allows you to say like, yes, I want this on my home screen, and start that live activity on your home screen too. So that provides like a very unique opportunity to both get users back into your application using push or email as a re-engagement platform, then to start engaging with them as part of an in-app experience, and then pushing them to a live activity to ensure that that in-app experience extends to the home screen.
Yep. So we work with about 1 million+ companies use OneSignal across the globe, all sorts of different use cases. We work with some of the largest sports leagues in the world, delivery services, and you've been leading the charge on live activities. You've been having this discussion with customers. What are some of the more interesting things you've learned that people want to do with it or not? I'm just curious, like tidbits from those conversations.
Yeah, we're definitely thinking a lot around kind of like frequency in terms of like making sure that so with live activities, you can send the concept of an alert form, which provides a user with the concept of like haptic feedback. So exactly when do they want that live activity to have like haptic feedback, and making sure it vibrates or making sure the screen dynamically loads. I think there's a lot of playfulness there, which we see with some of our clients in terms of like when to update a live activity. So that's been particularly joyful. I think we've also seen some kind of like different kind of use cases as well come up. So actually we work with one dating application, won't name them for now, but they're really interested in using like live activities as a way to engage a user in terms of how they're getting voted up and how they're being like profiled by potential other people that they may want to date. And I find that that's such an interesting use case for us in terms of how live activities can be set apart from other channels. So it is very much around that kind of like ongoing degree of engagement, and there's a lot of playfulness that can really be had with live activities.
So when we think about, I think one of the questions people are asking is, do I need a live activity? Should I invest it? Is it worth my time? You've answered some of that, but how would you answer that specifically? Is it worth our time to invest in live activities?
I think it's a very fun, new, playful channel. I think it really sets itself apart from other types of messaging channels. So when you think around a push message, you send out a static type message where people view, they get back into the application. When you send an email, it's very much around that daily engagement, reading through a newsletter. With SMS, again, it's around timely information, as it may be, to again get your user engaged into your application. With live activities, it's not just around like timely information, but it's about timely and updating information. And I find that that allows a lot of, I would say, playfulness with live activities, really being able to play with what those updates are, how your user's engaging, knowing that your user could click a live activity multiple times to get back into the application too. So really making sure there is a level of continued engagement, also re-engagement, which is really key. We haven't currently seen that amongst our other channels, though, that ability to update information. Like once you send out an email, that information isn't necessarily being updated in that email. That's where live activities are really uniquely different and diversified away from different channels. And this is where we really expect the market to grow. Showing Apple's investment and showing the degree of innovation, you know, being part of that use case when it comes to being an innovative mobile app is really key to go forward to really differentiate you away from the rest of the market.
So we talked a lot about how to use it, why. Are there considerations or concerns? And I can think of a couple. I'll start off, but let me just start at a broad base. Like, are there concerns you would have for some of the apps implementing it, or are there reasons why they shouldn't do it?
I think the main kind of concern that we've discussed with Apple is making sure your user really wants to do a live activity, making sure that there is an opt-in way or opt-in UX. So that could be a simple click of a button to make sure that they keep it on their home screen. I think the only concern would be as if you're not doing that, then of course this can produce like a level of spam or a level really of kind of like unneeded information on the home screen. And we just want to really want everyone to be kind of like cautious and be mindful around how you start and engage live activity. I think in terms of application use cases, I think that this will honestly grow. And so we've seen early use cases as noted by the dating app, by the delivery applications, by the sports-based applications. But I suspect that this is really going to grow and Apple's going to continue to invest in next year. So making sure that you're really kind of like part of the wave of innovation and making sure that you implement it earlier will pay off in the longer run.
Yep, and we did a podcast on this about a month ago, probably, so pre-launch and utilization. So if you want to go back and listen to that, you can, but some of the nuances we've learned since then, where at that time we didn't know fully how you would get people in. And there was a concern that we talked about briefly about, where this could be a way for Apple to keep people out of apps and just within the phone environment itself. That seems to not necessarily be the case, but is that a concern for some apps where if they start pushing live activities, people will be less likely to come back into the app? Or do we think that's not probably a concern?
I mean, it's always around engaging and keeping that application presence on your phone on an ongoing basis. Yep. The fact that you can click a live activity, go back into an application, like that allows the degree of re-engagement. So if anything, this is really going to drive users to your application as opposed to away. Yep. It also means as well that we have kind of like more mindful technology when it comes to how we're communicating with our customers. Like particularly rather than sending them, for example, like a push that pings up on their phone, they can have a discrete kind of like glance as they continue on with their work, for example. Yep. So we're seeing like this movement towards mindful technology, which I think is really key as part of live activities.
And if everyone's using live activities, does that completely clutter our screen? And so we've just got nonstop live activities on our screen. Yeah. What's the thought there in the conversations you've had with Apple and with some of the larger publishers that we're working with?
Well, we did actually a couple of beta tests internally, and we worked out, I believe, 5 live activities on the home screen at one time. Yep. So that's kind of great. So it means that really, like, when a user is engaging at live activity, it's going to be like really key and really critical information that they're going to want to be engaging with. Yep. So the good news is there's almost kind of like a reduction in the home screen in terms of the amount of messages that you may get. And I think we've kind of seen that with Apple over the past couple of years, when you've had the ability to group your notifications according to your application level and making sure that you can actually deal with a level of prioritization that is owned by the user themselves as well.
Yeah. The other thing I would add as well, for those of you with the newer phones, the always on screen makes a big difference. So these things will live here. You'll have live activities, and at a glance, you can engage without actually opening up your phone and going deep. And I believe, based on the conversations with Apple and what we've heard and learned, that's really the future. Like when you want to go deep in an immersive experience, clearly you're going to go back and do the application. You're going to dig in. You're going to want that. But for people, you're at dinner, you're at a meeting like this, I'm checking out my score. I'm like, oh, the stock, whatever it may be. I think it's going to be a fundamental shift so that you're not always getting sucked into your phone and getting lost into logging in. You can actually at a glance get really important and pertinent information. So, well, I can tell you've got a lot of excitement and passion for this. You've been working on it for a couple months now, so that's exciting. Any last kind of parting words before we turn over to questions, things you want to cover that maybe I missed, because I'm not living and breathing this every day.
Yeah, I guess I can talk briefly as well around like not just live activities, but some of Apple's other changes as well in terms of what's coming up really for 2023.
That'd be great.
So actually, Apple is continuing to invest as well in web push, and I think that that's really interesting because so far web push has been seen as very kind of like browser desktop based in terms of a messaging channel.
Yep.
They're actually introducing web push to both iPads as well as iPhones, and that's again going to really shift like how we perceive push, because push so far, particularly on iPhones, has been very mobile based, and particularly as we think around kind of like desktop and mobile experience, we're seeing that kind of like somewhat collapse into itself, as in it doesn't matter any longer what device you're on, but web push is another exciting area to really lean into in the future too. So that's pretty exciting for us.
Yep, agreed.
And then again, of course, coming back to live activities, we're going to continue to see investment as well when it comes to live activities. So I'm sure Apple will continue to kind of like promote best practice. We'll continue to see some use cases, some early adoption, and hopefully increased adoption to that being a very serious channel alongside our push platforms as well. So yeah, it should be an exciting year to come.
What do we know about potentially this functionality coming to Android next year?
We know very little right now, but what we do know is oddly enough, Android tends to keep up with Apple. So we usually find there to be like around, I would say, a year kind of delay. And over the next year, like I'm suspecting that Android is really going to ramp up. We'll expect them to very much hopefully align with regards to Apple. And hopefully we'll see some kind of like specific Android tweaks. And I guess like that's the playfulness with Android and Apple, because Android may actually introduce items that simply aren't in Apple, and Apple may play a little keeping up game there too. So I'm expecting it to be like a world of really great innovation.
Yeah, we get that question a lot, as you could imagine. And so I think it's an interesting dynamic between the two. And if you look at historically, Apple has been pretty innovative on the mobile OS. In fact, they were the creators of push notifications because they realized how do you stay engaged with an app that's maybe not on your home screen or you're not going to each and every day. And it feels like live activities is a natural progression of that, to create more utility for apps where it's relevant. I think the interesting part, which we danced around a little bit, is how much does Apple give leeway for apps to just kind of start live activities and engage with consumers, and how much they pull back on that? Right now, it feels like they're allowing a lot of leeway on the developer side.
Yeah, it's been a very interesting change actually for Apple, because Apple, for a very long time has really cared around what fonts are being used on there on iPhones. What is the look and kind of like feel? And actually in the past year, what we've seen is Apple saying like, hey, you can brand your home screen more. You can decide what you want on your home screen. You can decide your clock face. We're seeing really a great degree of customization. And I think Apple's really realizing as they look out to their competitors, like, let's give people the power of customization. Let's give people the power of further personalization with your devices, because devices now are becoming so much more kind of like personable. Like they are so critical to like your life, the way you work, how you connect with your friends, how you connect with your families. So really that personalization journey is really key. And I expect to really hopefully see Apple kind of like allow more personalization and customization over the next coming years.
Yeah. It's great. Well, I appreciate all that background. Now, happy to take questions or comments if people have those. You're more than welcome to ask anything. We may not be able to answer those questions, but just please put it in the chat.
So we have one question so far. It's a really great one. How do we manage the updates to live notifications? Do we have access to APIs to push automated updates or something else?
Yeah,
That's a good question.
Yeah, perfect question actually, because myself and my team have been working very hard on this. We are releasing this soon, which is great. We're going to be releasing a new live activities endpoint. This will allow you to tell us when you start a live activity, when you need to update a live activity, and when you need to end a live activity. And we're also introducing this concept of what's called an activity ID. Now, I believe we showed that on one of the previous slides, but an activity ID is very much a way to kind of like relate devices around a specific event. So for example, you've got that kind of like mass game, NFL MLB, any of those kind of like big sports major games that you may follow along with, you can basically relate all of those devices together and really understand the degree of engagement around a specific event. So when a user joins a specific event, when they leave a specific event, and really understand that across your wider audience, and that's really key too. So those are features that we are releasing very soon with OneSignal. So we'll be excited to have you all on board. Do get in touch with us if you have any additional use cases and questions as well, and we're more than happy to work with you as part of our support and technical team.
So I have a follow-up question, just a little nuance there. With my understanding was the push the token that would be used would be temporary per user,
Yeah.
and go away after that live activity. So how would you be able to associate that with, say, myself, if I'm starting live activity over a course of 3 or 4 days over 3 or 4 different events in the same app?
Yeah.
Would that temporary token stay the same?
It doesn't actually. So it's really interesting, really good question, because that wasn't a technical detail that we delved into yet. But really, push tokens are kept on a temporary basis for live activities.
Yeah.
When you have a push notification itself, you have a more permanent, and that basically can be revoked as it may be. So be turned on and off depending on a user's specific settings. Every live activity you create actually has a new temporary push token. And with that temporary push token, of course, that can be challenging for applications to really be able to manage the number of push tokens that you may be getting. And that will last for the 12-hour period at most. But it means that by using a service like us at OneSignal, we really manage your push tokens for you. So it makes it actually much easier for you to send out your messages and really make sure that you're focusing on the value add and being able to make sure you're doing your updating correctly, as opposed to having to manage all these tokens or technical complexities.
Yep. Thanks, Ruby, for that. I know that's been a challenge with the team. Just looking at that, and I know it's one of the challenges we're dealing with customers as well. So I see some more questions here. So
Yeah, we have a bunch more. We have another 3 or so right now. Feel free to keep adding them, folks. The next question we have is, will users be able to customize their push notifications?
Yes, so live activities are actually highly customized. Live activities don't require the same degree of, I would say, rigor around parameters that you need for push. So with a push notification, you tend to have a title message along with any kind of content such as images. With live activities, it very much works in a JSON blob, so therefore it's very key value paired based, which means that you can update as many fields as really you want to. However, there is also a restriction with the kind of sizing of that content, which I believe is around 4 megabytes. So you need to make sure that you're not, for example, trying to update too much content. You certainly don't want to be writing an essay, as it may be, within a live activity. You want to be keeping that short, snappy, and making sure that you're updating the fields as and when you need to.
that's good.
Great. Another question, another really good one. You showed some presets of recommended designs. Do we have access to those, and do we need to provide a certain level of details to use them, such as icons, images, etc.?
Yeah, this is a really great question too, actually, because we very much verge into what does the UX of a live activity look like, particularly when it comes to, as noted here, both icons as well as images. Now, actually, as I noted earlier before, live activities use the Activity Kit by Apple. This means that the actual look of a live activity, in terms of it being templatized, actually lives within your application itself, which means that you can really determine your images and your icons. And we really recommend that that be part of your application itself, as opposed to trying to update those images or icons on a dynamic loading. The dynamic loading and updating should be more around the actual content itself. For example, game scores, or for example, like progress bars, as it may be within the delivery case that we discussed earlier as well.
Yeah, that's great. Let's see, there's several others here.
How do live activities affect the current pricing model?
Yeah, this is a very good question. Right now, and we will announce this shortly, but we will provide, so first off, we're bullish on live activities, if you can't tell from Ruby's enthusiasm. And as a company, we ultimately want to provide access to companies of all sizes, the ability. And so we will have a model that for applications with less than 10,000 subscribers, they'll be able to use live activities on the free plan. And on the paid side, we'd be up to about 100,000. Beyond that in scope, there'll be a pricing that's tied to how many subscribers you ultimately have. Keep a note, this is a pretty expensive functionality because as we talked about, there's this database thing, we have to store the tokens. There's a bunch more information to be stored and managed. So that's where the pricing kind of comes in. But first and foremost, we will have free to get people exposure to it. We will be very generous on the current plans, and then there'll be a direct conversation for if you want to do it at a scale level. So more to come on that.
Great. Do we have any more questions? These have all been really wonderful so far. We have just a couple more minutes. We could probably
everyone.
one more. Great. We have just a little bit more to share with you. I'm going to share my screen again. We do have a landing page where you can get information about live activities and get an email when we've announced when it's released. You can sign up at onesignal.com/live-activities. I'll leave that up. We can also include that link in our follow-up email with the webinar recording that you'll all receive. So keep that in mind.
I'll add, Ruby mentioned this, but please, if you have feedback or you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Ruby's been getting on calls with dozens and dozens of existing customers, some non-existing customers who have questions and want to implement this or want to understand how to implement it. We want to learn from you as well. We want to empower this. We're delivering billions of notifications, more than 11 billion messages a day overall, but we work with all sorts of different companies, and we want to see live activities be successful. We want it to be working great for you as an application, but also all of your end consumers and users. So thank you all for participating and joining today, and appreciate you being part of the community.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thanks all. Have a good day.